Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and something very interesting has happened. We have an update here to this big Super Nintendo Direct rumor. So if you've missed out on what this big rumor is, the rumor is that there is going to be a general Nintendo Direct, if not in February, sometime in March, that will have the reveal for the next 3D Mario that would be one of the big holiday titles for this year for Switch 2, and also the next announcement from Monolith Soft. That's been the rumor. A lot of people have been misreporting this rumor, like some people are saying that the rumor is that the next new IP from Monolith Soft is going to be announced, and maybe that's what it is, but it's just that it's something from Monolith Soft. It could be a new IP, it could be the next Xenoblade, it could be perhaps a definitive edition or an enhancement of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. These are all possibilities, but all the rumor says is that something from them is going to get announced in the next General Direct. But this rumor has been talked about a lot lately. I've been talking about it a lot. It's an extraordinary claim, and I do think extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence before you believe them, but from the source, I think it's absolutely worth having a conversation, and over the last week or so, I do think there's a variety of little things that have come out that seem to support this idea even more so, and we've covered those in prior videos. But the most recent happenings are making this really interesting, and it might tie into the Sony State of Play that's happening tomorrow, and perhaps God of War coming to Nintendo Switch 2, which may be really hard to believe, but that's what we're getting into today. These days, with most phones taking USB-C and even the Switch 2 having 2 different USB-C ports, I find myself looking for the ideal USB-C cable. Which actually brings me to today's sponsor, Silkland, who sent over the best USB-C cable I've had in a very long time. It's fully compatible with USB 4 and Thunderbolt 5 standards, USB IF certified, and it has ultra-fast data transfer speeds. Going both ways at 80 gigabits per second, you can transfer 6 gigabytes of files in just 1 second. We're talking about incredible efficiency here. And then going one way at 120 gigabits per second, it's really great for plugging in your Switch 2 or your phone or your laptop into a bigger monitor so you can see it on a bigger screen. And it also supports intelligent fast charging with 240 watts. And this cable is a great length at 5 feet, so you can reach a lot of different places. So this is a high quality cable that you can use in a variety of ways. It's an ideal cable to use for your Switch 2, especially with that second USB-C port, where if you go into tabletop mode, let's say you're on the go, you're not at home, you can plug in that cable to keep your Switch 2 charging and play whatever you want for as long as you like. But something I found especially interesting about this cable that may surprise you is that Silkland really wanted me to show off just how durable this cable is. This is the kind of cable that you don't really have to be worried at all when it comes to your pets. Your dog, your cat, they can chew at this and it's not going to be damaged. It has reinforced 48-strand braided nylon, as well as a high-grade aluminum shell for heat dissipation, so this is not going to get too hot, it's not going to tear even at the fangs for your favorite furry friend. It's even so durable that it can suspend a decent amount of weight with 0 damage. You can bend this cable, pull this cable several times over, there will be no damage or breakage in any way. In other words, this is a durable, high-quality cable that is built to last. So if you're looking for a top-of-the-line, all-purpose USB-C cable fully compatible with USB 4 and Thunderbolt 5 that's extremely durable with a nice length as well, check out Silkland's cable. It will be linked in the description below and the pinned comment. Thank you to Silkland for sponsoring today's video. So this God of War rumor, like this big General Direct rumor, are both coming from Nash. Now, I've talked about Nash before a lot, and it's because he actually has a really good track record. Does not get everything right, but many things correct, and I'll have a segment later on to the video where I go over some of those. But yes, I absolutely think it's worth having the conversation. Don't assume it's going to happen, because sometimes these things don't turn out to be true, but there's a lot that has turned out to be true. So we are having the conversation, and this is the rumor. This year, a new God of War could arrive in the form of a spin-off. which would be a Metroidvania and would also come to Switch 2. And so this to me just seems super hard to believe. It's crazy, I would say. It's a WTF kind of game, and we'll be getting to that in a moment. But there are others that have spoken out that are supporting this rumor to an extent here. So, Adam Bardugo asked Nate the Hate about this rumor, and he actually said something that supports it to an extent. All I can say is this: when talk of the 2D God of War first started last year, I heard whispers that it was being considered for a multi-platform release. Whether that consideration evolved into an active plan, I don't know. And so this is actually extremely interesting, because Nate the Hate is considered by most to be a reliable insider. There are many people who don't get mad when Nate the Hate reports on something that he's heard, but people do get mad when there's conversations about Nash, which I think is unfair, but I also think Nate the Hate has been around for longer and is a lot more careful about these things. But the fact that Nate the Hate is saying something here that supports the idea to at least to an extent, he's not saying for sure it's happening, but that he's at least heard whispers of it, it does very much suggest that what Nash is saying here isn't just complete nonsense out of nothing. It's based off something. And this isn't the first time that Nate the Hate has said things in support of Nash, and my suspicion is that because Nate the Hate does know a lot of things, he sees a lot of things that Nash says, and sometimes at least, if not more so, it lines up with what he's heard. So for example, a lot of people, unfortunately, like to jump to conclusions and can't operate in the in-between, have to assume one way or the other. So when Nate the Hate was asked about this big Nintendo Direct, because people continue to ask him about this big rumor, he recently said, "I've only heard of one Direct for February, and it aired last week. Haven't heard anything at the moment to suggest another is coming this month." And if you look at a lot of Nate's replies in regards to this Direct rumor, he says, "I don't have anything to say at this moment in time." But people saw this and ran away with it, saying that Nate the Hate confirmed that there's not another Direct this month, which is not what he said. And so Nate the Hate even followed up and said this: "I'm not finding myself doing either. I don't have info to suggest one is or isn't coming." So he's not confirming there's a Direct this month, but he's also not confirming that there isn't a Direct this month. So let's keep that in mind, and let's also keep in mind that Nate the Hate has been known to shut things down when he does not think it makes sense, when he thinks it's ridiculous, when he thinks it's not true, and he does not shut down Nash rumors, so keep that in mind. But anyway, going back to this God of War rumor here, it is kind of like a WTF game. And so that gets me thinking, hold up, could this be the game that friend of the channel Kiwi Talks has been talking about as of late? If you don't know who Kiwi Talks is, he is a YouTuber who conducts interviews with different developers. In other words, he's well connected, and he has heard of a WTF game, a game that had him go WTF, a game that had him feeling that way when he was told it's supposed to come to Switch 2 this year. And he's been teasing it. Here's a little riddle he's put out there. "I sit beside legends, though none are my kin. I'm sold their same keys to let players in. I share the same screen, and I share the same light, yet my bloodline says I don't belong to the fight. What am I?" And you have this image here, and as you'll notice that God of War isn't here. However, Kiwi has said, as you see here in this thread, people are so fixated on the image that they aren't analyzing the riddle. And so when I look at this riddle, I'm not sure if I'm grasping its full meaning, and perhaps some of that has to do with maybe me not understanding the full lore behind perhaps God of War. But what I do get from this is that it's suggesting something that wouldn't really belong to Nintendo, that would belong somewhere else, like perhaps Sony. And so if it's not saying that's on this image here, but it is something that would have you think WTF, and is perhaps from Sony, well, maybe it would be God of War. And something like a Metroidvania style God of War, a 2D style spin-off God of War, I actually think is far more plausible than bringing over the mainline God of War games. We've seen Sony bring over Horizon, in Lego form, so a spin-off of one of their main IP, I could see them bringing over another, but this would be something a lot cooler. A Metroidvania of God of War is way better than a Lego version of Horizon, in my opinion, and it's not close. Of course, Kiwi has not said one way or the other what this WTF game is. Maybe it's God of War, maybe it's something else. We'll see. All we know is that supposedly he has heard it's supposed to come out this year, which does align with what we're hearing about from Nash regarding this God of War thing, so we'll see. But we have someone else that is corroborating this God of War rumor. It's RGT85. So I'll go ahead and play the clip here.
I've actually heard this. Not from Nate, not from anyone you would think I would hear this from. And it was a couple of weeks ago. And this individual was telling me, like, yeah, this is actually coming to Switch 2. It's going to be a PS5 and Switch 2 and PC game. And this person has no reason to lie to me or anything or fabricate something. And so once I kind of factor that in and factor what Nate the Hate said about this being something that was at least discussed initially, I honestly think there's a good chance that this is going to happen. And I know.
So as you see, even RGT85 has heard that God of War is coming to Nintendo Switch 2. And this is increasingly interesting because RGT85 in the past has actually critiqued and criticized Nash and those who talk about Nash. In my opinion, I don't think he's seen all the track history, but it's interesting because he's actually corroborating him in this case. And so we have RGT85 and Nate the Hate that have heard some things that support this rumor to an extent here. Now, a lot of people just refuse to believe that Nash has credibility, and quite frankly, I'm tired of sharing out all the different things that Nash has said. There's so many, but I did put together a segment from a video about a week or so ago that I've seen a lot of people clip and share, so I guess I'll just share my own clip that's a nice little summary of some of the things that Nash has gotten correct that kind of show that yes, he does have a pretty solid track record. Of course, if you've seen this before and you don't want to see it again, feel free to skip through a couple minutes. I'll have some timestamps here so you know where to go. But if you don't want to take my word for it, that's totally fine. Let me show you some of the receipts here. So, Nash on March 17th, 2025, just a few weeks before the big April Switch 2 Direct where Donkey Kong Bonanza was revealed alongside the Switch 2, Nash said, "Donkey Kong's next game won't leave you indifferent." Now, at this point, he was not certain when this Donkey Kong game would be announced. However, just a couple days before the Direct, he said this, "Let me tell you what's happening on the dark side of the web. For days now, folks have been saying that the new 3D Mario won't arrive this year, and yet Donkey Kong will be the star. About the Mario 3D, I can't tell you anything, but about Donkey Kong, I've already been filling you in, and I'm eager to see it." So at this point, Nash was suggesting that instead of 3D Mario to be in the big Switch 2 Direct reveal, which at that point many people assumed would be the case, we got Donkey Kong instead. And so that was exactly correct, and this is significant because it goes to show this particular source has proven accurate before, so if Nash is hearing something about 3D Mario in the next big General Direct, I think we should be paying attention to it. It does not mean that we can be 100% sure this is going to be true, but it does bode really well. Now, a lot of people like to assume that Nash has fake sources, whatever, even though he'll be leaking things like Donkey Kong instead of Mario in the big Switch 2 Direct. But let me just show you some other examples, just some of many leaks that he's gotten correct before anyone else was really predicting or talking about some of these things. So here, back in October of 2024, keep in mind the Switch 2 wasn't even announced until January of 2025, so a few months later. We didn't have the big Direct reveal confirming this game until April, but Nash before anyone else was talking about it, said there will be a special edition of Elden Ring for Nintendo Switch 2. The Tournament Edition was announced on April 2nd during the big Switch 2 Direct. Here, on February 6th of 2025, Nash said Indiana Jones would be getting announced for Nintendo Switch 2. That was confirmed later into 2025. Another one, Assassin's Creed Shadows coming to Nintendo Switch 2. He said this back in 2024, this is confirmed last year. From this last October, Nash teased 3 different events, as you see with these emojis here. And so what happened? We got the Mega Dimension DLC for Pokemon involving these two different forms of Raichu, hence the Lightning Bolt, then a blue little circle here, and we got the State of Play, so there's a connection there, and these are in order, November 6th, then November 11th, and then something having to do with a movie, and we get the Mario Galaxy Movie Direct in early December. So that's just another example. And here's another one. Nash leaked that there was a Yoshi game in the works, and just a couple months later, this Yoshi game was confirmed in the September Direct. Here's another one, that Mario and Luigi would be coming back. And a lot of people doubted that Mario and Luigi would even be seeing a comeback because the developer for this series was no more. And yet, Nash told us that this would be happening, and yeah, we got Mario and Luigi in 2024. And even recently, Nash suggested that there would be some events before the big General Direct. And yeah, we've gone several Directs and still haven't gotten an announcement for a General Direct. So at least in terms of the other stuff, that part's been confirmed so far, like in the Mario Galaxy Movie Direct, the Tomodachi Life Direct, and if this partner showcase is confirmed soon, that will be something else. Now, where is the General? As Nash has said he has heard, maybe the third week of February, and if not, sometime in March. He is seeking clarity. So yes, Nash does have a history of putting out leaks and rumors of things that are very hard to predict that end up coming true. A great deal of them, not all of them, but a great deal of them. And so maybe there is something to be said about this God of War rumor, especially when others are supporting it at least to an extent. And you might be wondering how this ties into the bigger Direct that's rumored. I'll be getting to that. But let me also point out that Nashville said this about the State of Play that's happening tomorrow. State of Play announced for February 12th. I was told that Switch 2 users should stay tuned, and that something from what's shown will be on the Nintendo console. And so other people have attacked Nash and insulted Nash for saying this because, well, State of Plays have had announcements before that showed up on Nintendo. But if you paid attention and you listened to the podcast where they updated on these latest Nintendo Direct rumors, it was discussed that there's already a full understanding that the State of Plays actually have had announcements that were also on Nintendo systems, but this time around, it's something more worthy of note. And so, going back to this God of War rumor, if this is what's announced in the State of Play, that would absolutely be something more worthy of note. And I think it would be a very big thing that would hopefully highlight to more people that yes, Nashville does hear about some pretty crazy things that are legitimate. Something else that should be clarified though, he's not saying it's going to be announced soon necessarily. Maybe it will be. Maybe it will be in this State of Play, or maybe it won't be. Maybe it'll be something else. So I'm going to be looking at the State of Play to see if there's anything here that is out of the ordinary and not just like a random indie title or something, but something significant. And what's also interesting about this is that this State of Play is actually apparently like an hour long. It's a very big State of Play, which is essentially a PlayStation Nintendo Direct, by the way. And so I think this is extra interesting because while Nintendo did put out a partner showcase, that partner showcase is going to be nothing comparable to an hour-long presentation from PlayStation, which sort of has you wondering, well, what is Nintendo bringing to the table here? Will they have a follow-up? Maybe they will, if the rumors are proving true. Which, by the way, this podcast where they talked about there being something more significant in the State of Play, they did also talk about, and this is the main bit of news from this podcast, from Attack the Backlog and Nash that one more source that had suggested perhaps March we would be getting this Direct has actually told Nash that it's happening in the third week of February. One more source. And I've been trying to tell people this, but a lot of people have been misinterpreting it, but even Nash himself came out afterwards, not that long ago, and said only one of the sources that pointed to March moved to February. You can't even imagine the hustle and bustle backstage. And that's a big thing that people don't understand about hearing things behind the scenes. A lot of things are changing and being moved around, so I'm not going to 100% assume that we're getting a Direct next week. I hope so. And Nash seems to be getting more confidence that that is indeed what is going to happen because he now has two sources that have indicated to him that next week is the week of this big General. But personally, I'm just going to stick to the window of time of, if not February, by the end of March, where he's had multiple sources indicating sometime in this window it'll happen. So yes, there are other sources that have yet to commit to the third week of February. So let's keep that in mind. Now, if you've gone this far into the video, let me just point out that I do have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my videos, I would very much appreciate your subscription if you haven't subscribed already. Liking, commenting, it all makes a big difference. But what do you all think? What do you make of perhaps a God of War Metroidvania-styled spin-off coming to Nintendo Switch 2, and others beyond Nash actually somewhat corroborating this rumor, and perhaps what that might suggest about his credibility and what we've heard regarding this bigger general direct that may have Mario and something Monolith Soft, if not in February, by the end of March. Let me know what you all think in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.